For most of his life, Felix never thought much about learning a new language. He lived in a quiet town where everyone spoke the same way, followed the same customs, and rarely traveled far. Felix was a simple man with a simple routine. He worked at a bakery, helped his neighbors when they needed something, and spent his evenings listening to music or watching the news. But deep inside, without even knowing it, Felix had a curiosity about the world. He just didn't realize it until one small but powerful moment shifted everything. It all happened on a rainy afternoon. Felix was arranging fresh loaves of bread on the shelf when a tall man with a backpack walked into the bakery. The man smiled and spoke English, asking something about gluten-free bread. Felix froze. He didn't understand the words, only the tone. He tried to guess, but nothing made sense. Embarrassed, he pointed randomly at some bread and said, "Sorry, no English." The tourist smiled again and left politely. But for Felix, that moment stayed in his mind all day and night. When Felix closed the bakery that evening, he sat at the counter, holding a warm cup of tea and thinking deeply. "Why don't I know English?" he asked himself. He had gone his whole life without needing it, but now he felt a strong desire to change. If I knew English, I could have helped him. I could understand songs, movies, and even people from other countries. That night, as the rain tapped on the windows, Felix made a decision that would change his life. He would learn English, no matter how old he was, no matter how long it took. The next morning, Felix went to a small stationery shop and bought a notebook, a pen, and a used English textbook. The shopkeeper smiled and asked, "Are you learning English?" Felix nodded and replied, "Yes, I'm starting today." Back at home, he opened the book and looked at the first lesson. "Hello, how are you?" He repeated the sentence slowly, writing it down in his notebook. It felt strange, but exciting. For the first time, Felix was a student again, and every word was a step towards something bigger. That evening, instead of watching his usual TV show, Felix searched for English videos online. He found a video for beginners and watched it 3 times, trying to follow along. He didn't understand most of it, but he liked the sound of the words. He paused, rewound, and repeated. "Practice," he said to himself. "I need to practice." As he turned off the lights and went to bed, he whispered his new favorite phrase, "Hello, how are you?" It was only the beginning, but Felix already felt something growing inside him. Hope, purpose, and a dream worth chasing. Chapter 2, Learning Little by Little. Felix quickly discovered that learning a language was not as easy as he first imagined. At the beginning, he was excited, full of energy, and ready to learn. But after a few days, he began to feel confused. He wrote down new words every day, but he often forgot them. Some words looked similar, but had different meanings. Others were hard to pronounce, and he felt silly saying them aloud. "Why is this so hard?" he whispered one evening. Still, he didn't give up. He knew that learning something new always came with challenges. To stay motivated, Felix made a daily routine. He studied for 30 minutes each morning before work and another 30 minutes before bed. He listened to English songs and tried to understand the lyrics. He watched short English videos with subtitles and repeated simple sentences out loud. "My name is Felix. I am learning English. This is my bakery. Every time he said a sentence correctly, he felt a little stronger, a little braver. These small victories helped him stay focused, even when he felt tired. At the bakery, Felix began labeling things in English. He put little paper notes on the oven that said oven, on the flour that said flour, and on the bread that said bread. He smiled each time he saw them. It made the bakery feel like a classroom. Some customers laughed when they saw the labels, but Felix didn't mind. He explained, I'm learning English, and this helps me. Many of them supported him, and even started helping him with pronunciation. Slowly, English became part of his world. One day, a teenager came to bakery and ordered something in English. Felix understood a few words and tried to answer. He said, Yes, bread. 2, please. The boy smiled and replied, Good English. It was a small exchange, but for Felix, it meant everything. It proved that his effort was working. He felt more confident than ever before. That night, he wrote in his notebook, Today, I spoke English with a customer. I'm improving. From that day on, Felix no longer doubted himself. He still made mistakes, of course, but he didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, he saw mistakes as lessons. When he forgot a word, he looked it up again. When he couldn't say something right, he practiced until it felt natural. Little by little, word by word, sentence by sentence, Felix was becoming someone new, someone who could speak a new language and open new doors. Chapter 3, The Power of Practice. Weeks passed, and Felix continued his journey with dedication. His notebook was now full of pages filled with new vocabulary, short dialogues, and motivational quotes. He wrote everything by hand because it helped him remember better. One of his favorite quotes was, Practice makes progress. He read it every morning to remind himself that perfection was not the goal, progress was. The more he practiced, the more confident he became. He no longer feared difficult words. He welcomed them. To improve his speaking skills, Felix began talking to himself in English. While baking, he would say, I am making bread today, or this cookie is very sweet. It felt strange at first, but over time it became natural. He even started describing his day in English. I woke up at 6 o'clock. I cleaned the bakery. I talked to 5 customers. Saying these simple things out loud helped him remember verbs and sentence structure. It also made his learning feel alive, like something he could really use. Felix also joined a small English club at the community center. It was free, and people of all ages attended. Some were complete beginners, just like him, while others spoke a little more fluently. Every Tuesday and Thursday, they met to read short stories, practice conversations, and play language games. Felix enjoyed the group because it gave him a chance to listen, speak, and connect. He made new friends, and for the first time, he didn't feel alone in his learning. During one session, the teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves. Felix stood up nervously and said, Hello, my name is Felix. I work in a bakery. I like music and learning English. The group clapped, and the teacher smiled. Felix felt his heart beat faster, not from fear, but from pride. He had just spoken in front of people in a language he barely knew a few weeks ago. That moment stayed with him for days, giving him the confidence to keep going. Outside the classroom, Felix kept pushing himself. He changed his phone settings to English. He wrote his shopping list in English. He started watching movies with English subtitles. Everything around him slowly turned into a language learning experience. The bakery, his home, his phone, even his thoughts, began to include English words. And with every change, Felix felt himself growing, not only as a learner but as a person. Chapter 4, Doubts and Determination. Despite all the progress Felix was making, there were still days when he felt stuck. One rainy morning, after a long shift at the bakery, he sat at the table with his notebook open and stared at the words. They looked like strangers, cold and distant. "Why can't I remember this?" he muttered. He had reviewed the same vocabulary 3 times, but nothing stayed in his head. Frustrated, he closed the book and sighed. Doubt began to creep in like a shadow. He walked around his small kitchen, feeling unsure of himself. Maybe it started too late. Maybe English was just too hard. Maybe he would never really speak fluently. These thoughts were heavy, and they made him feel small. But then he looked at a sticky note on his wall. It read, "Remember why you started." Those words reminded him of that rainy day when the tourist came into his bakery. That memory, simple but powerful, gave him strength. The next day, Felix returned to his routine. He didn't try to learn 10 new words or finish an entire lesson. Instead, he just reviewed 5 sentences he already knew. He read them slowly, carefully, repeating them out loud. "My name is Felix. I live in a small town. I am learning English." With each sentence, his voice grew stronger. He realized that it was okay to go slow. Progress wasn't about speed. It was about showing up every day. To help himself stay motivated, Felix created a reward system. If he studied for a full week, he would treat himself to his favorite dessert. If he finished a chapter from his textbook, he would take a relaxing walk through the town park. These small rewards helped him feel good about the effort he was making. He learned that kindness to himself was just as important as discipline. Felix also started writing a journal in English. At first, his sentences were very simple. "Today I am happy. I went to the market. I saw a cat." But slowly his writing improved. His sentences grew longer. He began to describe his feelings, his dreams, and even his fears. Writing became a way to practice English and express his heart. And in doing so, Felix discovered not only the language, but also a deeper connection to himself. Chapter 5, A New Customer. One quiet morning, while Felix was opening his bakery, a young woman walked in. She looked around and smiled politely. "Hello," she said in a clear voice. "Do you speak English?" Felix stood for a moment, surprised. He took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, a little." The woman smiled again and asked for 2 croissants and a coffee. Felix repeated her order slowly to make sure he understood, then handed her the items. "Here, your coffee and 2 croissants." She nodded and thanked him. Felix couldn't believe it. He had just served a customer in English, completely by himself. After she left, Felix felt his heart racing. He leaned against the counter and smiled to himself. "I did it," he whispered. For the rest of the day, he couldn't stop thinking about that short conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. She understood him, and he understood her. That moment felt like a small miracle. He wrote it down in his journal as a special memory. "Today, I spoke with a tourist. We understood each other. My English is helping me connect with people." From that day forward, Felix started practicing more specific sentences that he might use at work. He learned phrases like, "Would you like anything else?" and "We open at 7 in the morning." He wrote them on a piece of paper and practiced during breaks. He even asked his English club teacher to help him correct his pronunciation. Each time he practiced, he imagined more conversations like the one he had that morning. Soon, Felix noticed that more tourists were coming into the bakery. Word was spreading that the friendly baker who speaks English was in town. People were curious and excited to talk to him. Even if their English was different from his, they smiled, used gestures, and made the effort. Felix started enjoying these moments more than ever. His bakery wasn't just a place to buy bread anymore. It was a place where languages met, where people connected. By the end of the week, Felix felt a change inside him. He no longer saw English as something scary. Instead, he saw it as a tool, something useful, powerful, and beautiful. Learning English was not just helping him at work. It was opening his heart to a world full of people, stories, and opportunities. And deep inside, he knew he was only getting started. Chapter 6, Helping Others. As Felix continued learning, he noticed something new. People around him began asking questions about English too. One day, his neighbor, Mrs. Teresa, asked, "How did you learn to speak with tourists?" Felix smiled and said, "I study a little every day." She looked amazed and said, "Can you help me learn too?" At first, Felix felt shy. He didn't feel like a teacher. But then he remembered how hard it had been at the beginning. Maybe he could make it easier for someone else. He invited Mrs. Teresa to join him one evening at the bakery after closing time. He brought his old notebook, his English club books, and some of the vocabulary cards he had made. They started with greetings like, "Good morning," and "How are you?" Mrs. Teresa laughed as she tried to repeat them. Felix said, "Don't worry, I was the same." That night, they learned together, and it felt good. Teaching helped Felix see how far he had come. Word spread quickly, and soon 3 more neighbors asked to join their little group. Every Thursday night, Felix's bakery became a classroom. The smell of fresh bread filled the room while people practiced English. Some were young, some were old, but all of them were excited to learn. They took turns reading simple sentences, helping each other pronounce tricky words. Felix used the same methods that had helped him: music, repetition, small conversations. One night, during a lesson, a man said, "Felix, you are a good teacher." Felix blushed and replied, "Thank you. I'm still learning too." But deep down, he felt proud. He never imagined that his personal goal would grow into something that helped others. His journey was no longer just about him. It was about his whole community. He was helping people believe in themselves, just as he had learned to believe in himself. As the group grew, Felix made a decision. He wrote to the local community center and asked if he could volunteer as an assistant in their English classes. A few weeks later, he received a letter. "Yes, we would love to have you." Felix smiled and looked around his bakery. Who would have thought that a simple desire to speak English would lead him here? Chapter 7. The English Speaker. Months had passed since Felix first began learning English. His progress was clear in many ways. He could now have full conversations with tourists, help his neighbors learn, and even assist the English teacher at the community center. More than just learning words and grammar, Felix had built a new part of himself. He no longer introduced himself as a man who is learning English. Now he said proudly, "I speak English." That change in confidence changed everything. One morning, a reporter visited the bakery. She was writing a story about local heroes who make a difference in their town. Someone had told her about Felix, the baker who taught English. The reporter asked questions in both Spanish and English, and Felix answered in both languages. "Why do you teach others?" she asked. Felix smiled and said, "Because someone once believed in me. Now I believe in others." His story touched many readers, and soon more people came to meet him. His bakery became more popular than ever. Customers loved the warm bread and warm heart they found there. Some brought him English books. Others came to practice speaking. Children waved at him and said, "Hello, Mr. Felix." He always replied with a big smile. He had created a special place, not only for food, but also for hope. People knew they could learn, grow, and feel safe there. It wasn't just a bakery anymore. It was a center of learning. Felix often sat at the end of the day with a cup of tea, thinking about how far he had come. He still made mistakes in English, and sometimes he forgot words. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was his courage, his consistency, and his desire to grow. He had learned that learning never ends, and that was a beautiful thing. One night, he wrote a final message in his first notebook. "I started this journey to learn English. I thought I would just memorize words. But I learned much more. I learned patience, strength, and love. And now I will keep learning, not just for me, but for everyone who dreams of something more." Then he closed the book with a smile and said softly, "Thank you, English. You changed my life." Chapter 8. A Visit from the Past. One rainy afternoon, as Felix was organizing the books in his little English corner at the bakery, the doorbell rang. A man walked in, soaking wet but smiling. "Felix, is that you?" he asked in Spanish. Felix turned around and gasped. It was Mr. Antonio, his old English teacher from school. "I heard about your bakery," said Mr. Antonio, "and I heard you speak English now." Felix laughed and hugged him. "Yes, finally," he replied, half in English, half in Spanish. Seeing his old teacher brought back so many memories of when he first struggled to say hello. They sat down at a small table with hot tea and bread. Mr. Antonio listened as Felix told him everything: the first English club, the conversations with tourists, the neighborhood classes, and the moment he was interviewed by a local newspaper. "I'm so proud of you," said the teacher, smiling. "Back in school, you always had questions. I knew you had the heart, even when you didn't believe it yet." Felix blushed. Hearing that from someone he admired meant everything to him. As they continued to talk, Felix switched between Spanish and English with ease. Mr. Antonio smiled and said, "You know, you speak English like someone who lives a language, not just learns it." Felix liked that thought. It reminded him that learning English was not about being perfect. It was about using it to live, connect, and grow. Before leaving, Mr. Antonio gave him a small gift, a worn-out copy of a famous English novel. "This book helped me fall in love with English," he said. "Now it's your turn." That night, Felix sat in bed, holding the book. The pages smelled of old paper and memories. He opened the first chapter and began reading slowly. The words were more difficult than what he was used to, but he didn't feel discouraged. Instead, he felt curious, ready for the challenge. He underlined words, made notes, and whispered each sentence. It was hard, but it felt like the next step in his journey. By the time he closed the book, it was almost midnight. He had only finished a few pages, but he was proud. This book wasn't just about learning more vocabulary. It was about becoming someone who truly enjoyed English. For the first time, Felix wasn't just learning to speak. He was learning to think in English, to feel it. And that was something he never expected. Chapter 9, a big decision. As months passed, Felix became more involved in helping his community learn English. His Thursday classes grew from 5 people to more than 20. The community center asked him to teach once a week, and his schedule began to fill with lessons, meetings, and conversations. One evening, while walking home from the bakery, Felix paused under a streetlight. He looked at the stars and asked himself a big question. Is it time for something new? The next morning, he sat down with his friend Maria, who worked at the city's education office. "I want to study more," he told her. "Maybe take a course, or even go to school again." Maria nodded. "You should. Your passion is clear. Maybe you could study to become an official English teacher." That idea had never crossed Felix's mind. Could he really go back to school at his age? Would he be good enough? Still, the thought made his heart beat faster, with excitement, not fear. Over the next few days, Felix researched programs online. He found a course for adults who wanted to become English tutors. It was part-time and perfect for his schedule. He talked to his family and his students. Everyone supported him. "You were already our teacher," said one student. "Now it will be official." Felix smiled and filled out the application. When he hit the submit button, he felt like he had jumped off a cliff, but in the best way possible. Weeks passed and Felix waited. Every time the mail arrived, he rushed to the door. One afternoon, he finally saw the envelope. With shaking hands, he opened it. "Congratulations," the letter began. "You have been accepted into the program." Felix stared at the words for a moment, then shouted with joy. He danced around his bakery, laughing. "I'm going back to school," he yelled. For the first time in years, he felt like a student again. That night, he stood in front of the mirror, practicing his introduction in English. "Hello, my name is Felix. I'm from Mexico. I want to become an English teacher." He smiled at his reflection, and repeated it again and again. This was not the end of his journey. In fact, it was just beginning again, but on a higher level. Felix knew that he was no longer just a learner. He was now someone who could inspire others to begin their own English adventure. Chapter 10. The first day of school. The day had finally arrived. Felix's first day as a student again. He woke up early, dressed neatly, and packed his favorite notebook, a few pens, and the old English novel Mr. Antonio had given him. As he stepped out of the house, he felt both nervous and excited. He hadn't been in a classroom for many years, but this time it was different. This time, he was there by choice with purpose and passion. At the school, he met people of all ages. Some were older, some younger, but all of them had one thing in common. They wanted to teach English. The teacher introduced herself and asked everyone to share their story. When it was Felix's turn, he stood up and said in English, "My name is Felix. I have a bakery. I started learning English to speak with customers. Then I helped my neighbors. Now, I want to help even more people." The class clapped, and Felix felt tears in his eyes. His story mattered. Classes were hard. There were grammar rules he had never learned before, teaching strategies, and long hours of reading. But Felix never gave up. Every day he practiced, asked questions, and helped others. He was not the fastest student, but he was one of the most determined. His teacher noticed and told him, "Felix, you are going to be a wonderful teacher, not because you're perfect, but because you care." Weeks turned into months, and soon Felix stood in front of the classroom, ready to teach his first lesson. He looked at the group of beginner students, some nervous, some curious. He smiled and said, "Hello, my name is Felix. Today, we will learn together." His voice was calm and strong. As he began the lesson, something magical happened. The same passion that helped him learn English now helped him teach it. That night, as Felix walked home on the stars, he felt full of peace. He had dreamed of learning English. Then he dreamed of teaching it. Now both dreams were real. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, English. You changed my life. Now I will help others change theirs." With a smile on his face and hope in his heart, Felix walked into the future, one word at a time. Chapter 11. A Student's Letter. One afternoon, after finishing his English class at the community center, Felix found a small envelope on his desk. It was handwritten with careful letters and smelled faintly of lavender. Curious, he opened it. Inside was a letter from a young girl named Daniela, one of his newest students. The first line made Felix stop and smile. "Dear Teacher Felix, thank you for teaching me English. You make me believe that I can speak too." His heart warmed as he read each word. She had written the entire letter in English, full of small mistakes, but full of honesty and courage. As he continued reading, Felix noticed something else. Daniela explained that her parents didn't speak English and that she wanted to help them when they went to hospitals or filled out forms. She wanted to be their voice. "You showed me that learning English is not only for school, but for life," she wrote. Felix folded the letter and placed it gently in his notebook. He had never felt so proud. More than a teacher, he felt like a guide, helping others find their voice. That night, Felix couldn't sleep. He thought of Daniela, of his first English word, of all the people who had helped him. He remembered how lost he used to feel when he didn't understand English, and now he was helping others feel less lost. He realized something very important. He was no longer just chasing a dream. He was living it and passing it on. Teaching English had become more than a job. It had become his mission. The next day, Felix showed Daniela's letter to his teacher training classmates. "This," he said, "is why we do this." Everyone smiled and nodded. The group had started as strangers, but now felt like a team. They supported each other, shared tips, and practiced together. Felix loved the energy, the hope, the way learning English united people from all walks of life. Language wasn't just about grammar. It was about connection, heart, and story. Felix placed Daniela's letter in a frame and hung it near the entrance of his bakery. Customers read it and asked about his classes. Many signed up, inspired by her words. And so, one simple letter became a spark that lit up many lives. For Felix, it was a reminder. Every word matters, every voice counts, and even a small thank you in broken English can carry the power to change a teacher's life. Chapter 12. Speaking in Public. One day, Felix received a call from a local radio station. They had heard about his story and invited him to speak about learning and teaching English. At first, Felix panicked. "Me? Speak on the radio? In English?" His hand shook. He almost said no, but then he remembered how far he had come. "Yes," he said, "I would be honored." The interview was scheduled for the following Friday. He had 1 week to prepare. Each day, Felix practiced what he would say. He wrote notes, recorded himself speaking, and asked the students to give feedback. "Don't worry," they told him. "You're amazing already." But Felix was still nervous. He didn't want to sound silly or make mistakes. He wanted to inspire others. On Thursday night, he barely slept, pacing around his kitchen, repeating sentences out loud. The day arrived. Felix wore his best shirt and walked to the radio station with his notebook in hand. As he sat in the studio with a microphone in front of him, his heart raced. But when the host smiled and said, "Welcome, Felix, tell us your story," something inside him relaxed. He took a deep breath and began. He spoke slowly, clearly, and with emotion. He told them about his bakery, his struggle, his students, and his dreams. When the interview ended, the host shook his hand and said, "Your story will inspire many." Felix walked home with tears in his eyes. He had done it. He had spoken English on the radio. Not perfectly, but with courage. And that, he realized, was the key. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying, sharing, and being real. The next day, people came to the bakery just to meet him. "I heard you on the radio," one customer said. "You made me believe I can learn, too." Felix smiled and handed her a fresh piece of bread. "Yes," he said in English, "you can." Chapter 13. Felix travels abroad. Months later, something incredible happened. Felix was invited to attend an international teachers' conference in Canada. At first, he couldn't believe it. Me? Travel to another country? He had never even been on a plane. but his students encouraged him, and the conference covered most of the expenses. "You deserve this, teacher," they told him. "Go and tell the world your story." Felix got his passport, packed his best clothes, and flew on a plane for the first time. Everything felt new. The airport, the announcements, the language, the cold air when he landed. But the moment he stepped into the conference hall and saw teachers from around the world, he felt something familiar. Hope. Everyone there had once been a student. Everyone there believed in the power of education. He gave a small speech during one of the workshops. "I started with a dream and a dictionary," he said, smiling. "Now I teach others. If I can do it, anyone can." The room clapped, and some even cried. After the speech, people came up to him, asking for advice, sharing stories, and thanking him. Felix realized that his journey was not just personal. It was part of a bigger movement. During his free time, Felix explored the city. He practiced English with strangers, visited museums, and even ordered coffee like a native speaker. He felt proud, not because he was perfect, but because he wasn't afraid anymore. His mistakes didn't stop him. They made him stronger. At one point, standing by a river, he thought, "This is the life English gave me. This is the power of one decision." When he returned home, the whole neighborhood welcomed him like a hero. They brought signs, balloons, and music. Felix laughed, hugged everyone, and said, "I'm home, but my dream is bigger than ever." He knew now that English was not just a tool. It was a door, and behind that door, there was a world waiting to be explored. Chapter 14, Teaching with Passion. Back in his hometown, Felix poured all his new knowledge into his teaching. He redesigned his classes, added group activities, and encouraged storytelling. "Tell me about your first job," he'd say in English. "Describe your favorite food. Talk about your dreams." His students loved it. They felt free, like their voices mattered. One woman said, "Teacher, I never thought I'd speak English, but now I do." Felix also began mentoring new volunteer teachers. Some were nervous, just like he had been. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. The most important thing is to care. If you care, they will learn." Under his guidance, the program grew. More people joined. More lives changed. It was beautiful to watch. The bakery became a place of learning, laughter, and support. One day, a teenager named Luis came in and said, "Teacher, I want to be like you. I want to teach English too." Felix smiled wide. "You will," he said. "Start now. Help me with the kids group." Together, they taught songs, games, and short stories. Felix felt proud not just as a teacher, but as a builder of future teachers. That was the true success. Even when days were long and tiring, Felix never lost his joy. "English changed my life," he often said. "Now it's changing theirs." He began writing short lessons online, sharing tips and stories. People from other cities and even other countries started following him. His simple way of teaching reached hearts far beyond his town. One night, looking at his first English notebook, Felix whispered, "Thank you, past me, for never giving up." He closed the book and smiled. The journey was not easy, but it was beautiful. And it wasn't over yet. Chapter 15, A Dream That Never Ends. Years passed. Felix's hair turned gray, but his heart stayed young. The bakery still smelled of bread and hope. His students came and went, but the classroom was always full. English was now part of the town's daily life. People greeted tourists, helped neighbors, and even got better jobs. All because someone once said, "Let's learn together." Felix now taught fewer classes, but he spent more time writing. He published a small book about his journey, from bread to English. It was full of photos, letters from students, and lessons learned. The book became popular, not because it was fancy, but because it was honest. It told the truth. Learning is hard, but possible. Teaching is a gift, and words can build bridges. One afternoon, Daniela, the girl who once wrote him a letter, returned as a young woman. She was now an English teacher, too. "You changed my life," she told him. Felix smiled. "No," he said gently. "You changed your own life. I just showed you the way." That moment was everything to him. Proof that the dream had grown, bloomed, and multiplied. Felix often sat by the window of his bakery, watching children walk by with backpacks, laughing in 2 languages. He didn't need fame or riches. His reward was in every sentence spoken, every heart opened, every dream born in English. That was more than enough. And so the story of Felix didn't end. It continued in every student he taught, in every word they learned, and in every life they touched. Because when you teach with love, your dream never dies. It only gets passed on.